The Bank of New Zealand is releasing their interest rate data on Wednesday, and here's what Christopher Vecchio of Daily FX had to say about it. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand meets for the first time since August, and to an extent, rate markets haven't changed their expectations in recent weeks. In August, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand revised its expectation for main rate in 2023 from 3.7% to 4.10% by quarter 2 of 2023. In recent weeks, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand Deputy Governor Christian Hawkesby said that policymakers want to bring the main rate comfortably above neutral in order to help reduce inflation pressures, which stood at plus 3.7% year over year as of quarter 2 of 2022. Rates markets have been pricing in at 50 basis point rate hike at each of the October and November meetings. Beyond there, however, the cadence of rate hikes may slow to 25 basis points in 2023. An article from Bloomberg News says the Reserve Bank has been at a forefront of global rate hikes, but the Fed has closed the gap with 3 75-point moves, causing the greenback to surge against most other currencies. The New Zealand dollar's 6.3% slump the past month, at one point reaching a 13-year low, may fan inflation by making imports more expensive. Globally, central banks continue to signal further rate hikes will be needed to regain control of inflation. The Fed last month forecasted its benchmark federal funds rate would reach 4.6% in 2023 from the current 3 to 3.25% target. Still, the Reserve Bank of Australia today took economists and investors by surprise, raising its cash rate by only 25 basis points instead of the 50 that was widely expected. Wednesday's Reserve Bank of New Zealand decision, due at 2 p.m. local time in New Zealand, is an interim review rather than a quarterly monetary policy statement, so the bank won't issue new forecasts and there is no press conference with Governor Adrian Orr. Now, let's take a look at what the Edgefinder has to say about our New Zealand pairs. Starting off in the score chart summary, let's take a look at these NZD pairs. We'll notice that the first NZD pair that pops up is NZD JPY with a neutral buy bias, and after that our other NZD pairs fall into sell biases. NZD CAD and NZD CHF sitting on the brink with -2 scores, but NZD USD with a sell bias score of -4. So let's click on NZD USD and see what the Edgefinder has to say about it. We can see our COT data has scores of -2, with our COT data information coming in right here. US dollar 73.77% long, while the New Zealand dollar sits at 34.09% long. And retail sentiment has us at 71% overall for the pair, giving us a retail sentiment score of -1. Seasonality sits at -1 and trend reading -2, so this market is moving down respectively. And then GDP growth, inflation, and unemployment all sit at +1, while interest rate sits at -1. And we have all of our fundamental data right here. We can take a look at interest rates. US dollar currently sits at 3.25%, and the New Zealand dollar sits at 3% currently. Finally, let's wrap up by hearing what TraderJake had to say about New Zealand pairs on today's live stream.
Like Euro NZD and a couple of these NZD pairs. Wow, look at this move on Euro NZD, absolutely massive. But let's take a look at this news here, going over till tomorrow or today, later on today, which is going to be the NZD official cash rates, right? So they're projecting a 50 basis point rate hike. Now their rates are already sitting at 3%, which is higher than the Australian dollar. However, it's kind of similar in the sense that they're projecting a 50 basis point rate hike. What if they come in at 25 basis points, right? Just like the Australian dollar did. What if they only come in at 25 basis points instead of 50 basis points? Well, in that case, it's going to be very, very bearish for the NZD, right? So then we can look at a pair like New Zealand dollar, and we could potentially, especially guys, this is the type of confluence that I look for is, you know, if the dollar index is holding up here and we're starting to get some reaction off of this level of support, and this news comes out, and let's say the NZD only gets a 25 basis point rate hike, that's the kind of confluence that I would say, hey, you know, if NZD is sitting up here at this level of resistance here, and that basis point only gets raised 25, right, by 25, maybe we can see some shorts on this pair. So that's the kind of confluence, because what that would be is a strong dollar in confluence with a weak NZD, and that would lead to obviously a very strong downtrend. So the first area that I would look at is obviously this first area of resistance here, which we've already rejected off of. So we're coming back up to it now. And if we actually do reject off of this area, right, we could maybe expect this level to hold up and come back down to these range lows. So that would be the first area that I would look at. The next area that I would potentially look at is just this little area right here of demand that clearly we held up. We could potentially get a break and retest shorting opportunity here, right? If those those rates come back lower than expected. If those rates come back lower than expected, NZD dollar gets very bearish. We could see a break through these lows, and then maybe I could play that retest to then come back down to these range lows, right? And what that would probably look like is, now we're just using hypotheticals here, right? Because you have to have scenarios and you have to have a game plan for each scenario. If the NZD only gets a 25 basis point rate hike, which would obviously be very bearish, what you'd probably see is a huge 30-minute candle just straight down, right? It would probably break through all the support. It would go straight down. What I would then look for is the retest. I would try to get in on some shorts somewhere around here, and then I would play that next leg down after that dust kind of clears from the news. So I'm not looking to get in on the actual news, but if that news creates some sort of momentum, right, then I could potentially play that momentum. Now that's the bearish scenario for the NZD. Let's talk about the bullish scenario for the NZD, because I do actually think that the bullish scenario may be more likely, right? The NZD is already sitting at a higher interest rate than a lot of other currencies. They're projecting a 50 basis point rate hike. If they raise rates 50 basis points or even 75 basis points, what we'll probably see is a break through these highs. So it's the same thing, just in reverse. If we break through these highs because of that news, then we get a retest of this area. We could get some longs up into this next area of resistance up here. So again, I'm just looking for simple break and retests. Whenever I have news coming out, what I'm just going to look for is that news to create some sort of momentum, and then I'm going to look to play that momentum with a retest play. Now, Nick was talking about before how, NZD dollar has just been in an absolute massive downtrend, and that's true, right? NZD dollar has been in an absolute massive downtrend, so it's hard for me to be extremely bullish on this pair. However, when we're a day trader and we're looking at the hourly time frame, the 30-minute time frame, we're just looking to play some momentum to catch 80 pips, 100 pips. There absolutely still is some room left to go, right? If we draw this fib from the swing high to the swing low, we could get a 50% retracement. Maybe we even get that 618 retracement, right? So you could still be bearish on the NZD versus the dollar in the higher time frames, and you could still get a lower time frame corrective counter trend move that is worth taking along on. So if this news actually provides that opportunity, that's something that I would definitely be interested in. So again, to wrap it all up, to make it easily digestible, waiting for this news to see what will happen with these interest rates, right? If interest rates come out as expected or more than expected, you may see this big move up through this resistance. At that point, you would wait for the retest, in my opinion. That would make the most sense. Now, if this news comes out very bearish for the NZD, only raising 25 basis points, we could break through these lows, get the retest, and then play this back down to these range lows down here. So just waiting for either of those two opportunities to play out on the NZD versus the dollar. Of course, anytime you're looking at the dollar, you also want to look at the DXY to see how the dollar end of that pair is going to be affected, right? And look for that confluence. Now let's take a look at Euro NZD just to cover these NZD pairs, and then we'll move on to some other stuff as well. Euro AUD, USD CHF. All right, we'll get to all those. We're going to take a look at a couple more of these NZD pairs, and then we'll get to those other pairs, guys, I promise. So Euro NZD clearly was a very, very nice longing opportunity. Really a textbook kind of play here. We had a nice breakout. We moved back down into this demand, and then we had a really nice move back up. We're starting to see some weakness come in now, but this may just be a correction before that next leg up, right? So I would say there's really no opportunities now. It's kind of already too late. Kind of missed the boat, right? But if it's the same thing. This news is coming out on the NZD. So if the NZD gets extremely weak, right? If the NZD gets extremely weak, if they only raise rates 25 basis points or something like that, what you may see is Euro NZD just kind of continue this tear that it's been on. And at this point, you may look at this area for a potential break and retest play, right, to get that next move up. So if that news creates some bullish momentum for Euro NZD, look to play the retests. Look to play the retests and look to just continue these trends. Now, if the NZD comes out very bullish because they're raising rates 50 basis points or 75 basis points, what we may see is a correction here on this pair. We may actually come up. Maybe we get a double top or something like that, and it provides some bearish structure for us to get short on this pair. I would say I would definitely not be looking to short it as of now, but news can change things really fast. Like, this is just in a massive uptrend. The euro is just completely gaining on the New Zealand dollar, clearly. I don't really want to mess around with trying to short this, so I'd prefer to long it on New Zealand dollar weakness. But, news is the type of thing that could finally reverse a trend. So, perhaps if this level gets broken here, this level of demand that held up so well, if that gets broken and we turn that into supply from the opposite side, right, this would probably be the only scenario in which I'd be interested in shorting this pair, just based on the fact that it's been in this massive uptrend for so long. I don't really want to mess around with trying to short this double top or something like that, and end up just having this trend continue on me.